Hey folks, you're listening to the Java Easily podcast, episode number 12.
Java Easy. News, tutorials, tips. Everything you need to know as a beginner Java developer.
Hi there, welcome back to the Java Easily podcast. In this episode, we're going to look at how a Java developer evolves from being a complete beginner who's lucky to be given a shot and be hired to be a seasoned professional who can virtually command his own salary. Now, just before we get started, if it turns out that you're completely new to Java and you haven't yet grabbed your Java Beginner Starter Kit, just go over to our website at javaeasily.com and go grab it there. It's a super helpful guide to help you get up and running with Java, completely free, and it'll help you get set up with Java coding today. Anyway, now into the content of the episode. So, one of the things I'm often asked is, how do you go from being a complete Java beginner who knows nothing whatsoever about Java? How do you go from that position where everything's new to you, maybe things seem a little bit overwhelming, you're in a new job, you're trying to get started, you're trying to get traction, understanding how all this Java technology stuff works together, how do you go from that beginner person to ultimately become a seasoned professional, seasoned software engineer with tons of experience under your belt and having this seemingly almost innate ability to be able to just code your way effortlessly through the Java projects that come your way as a developer? So I think really to look at this, we have kind of 3, maybe 4 different levels, if you like, which we need to go through as a software engineer to be able to get to that final outcome where you're that seasoned professional and effectively you know what you're doing. It's nice when you're there, of course, because you don't have to take any guidance. You've got a feeling of autonomy, being able to control what you do and how you do it. And it's just a great feeling being there. But how do you actually get there? Okay, so let's take a look at these levels then. So for me, on the first level, the first thing you ever do when you get started as a Java developer is you're kind of on this level 1, what I'd call humble beginnings with core Java in an IDE phase. So initially, you're only focused on learning the language. You're just focused on learning Java as a programming language, getting used to the syntax, getting used to coding, how it feels to code, how the interaction of all the different symbols within the syntax and the keywords and everything, how they kind of work together. You're getting your mind around different aspects like variables, control structures, conditionals, looping, having to get your head around objects as well, and polymorphism, inheritance, and encapsulation, and all that kind of stuff. And at this point, you're basically just trying to get all of this kind of stuff, this kind of set of abstract concepts. You're just really trying to get it straight in your head. So that based on this kind of grab bag of things that you're exposed to in the Java programming language, based on this, you can hopefully assemble a program together, little small application. It's not going to be a big thing at this stage because we're just learning how you can stitch that together and get something that at least works. In other words, you can run that application and it does what you wanted it to do. Now, along the way, we're not just going to be focusing on the language itself. Java can seem a little bit abstract at first. But in addition to having to deal with that aspect, we're also having to deal with and get used to the tools we use as well. So that's, for example, being able to find your way around an IDE. That's the integrated development environment. So using tools like Eclipse or JetBrains IntelliJ, possibly NetBeans or what have you, finding out how to arrange our code, and ultimately how we can use the IDE to be able to edit the code, compile it, respond to syntax errors or whatever helpful suggestions the IDE will give you to be able to ultimately go towards a finished running program. And at that point there, when you've done that, when you've kind of achieved that level where you can be given a small thing to code up and you yourself can code completely from scratch the solution to that thing in an IDE, using the tools, using the programming constructs from the Java language in the way they're supposed to be used, and then you see that finished result, that running program, running there in the IDE, then that's a great first level to be on. Because you started from nothing, you didn't know anything about how Java works, how the tools work, how also the platform works as well, something else which you've got to get your head around on this first level. So the concept, for example, of the JDK, the compiler, bytecode, class files, compilation, command line tools, whatever, and all that kind of stuff. All these concepts have got to somehow settle down inside your head so that you can be in that kind of Zen position, if you like. Not to sound new agey about it, but that kind of Zen position where you feel in control, that you can autonomously code something up. A small little app inside an IDE and get it to run, and for the most part it does what you want it to do. So this first level is really about becoming comfortable, I'd say. But of course, as a Java developer, you can't just stay at that level. So then you kind of ascend to level 2. And this is really where you're spreading your wings with enterprise Java and understanding how to code with frameworks, such as Spring, Spring Boot, that kind of thing. So at this point here, we're now going outside of the IDE. We can't live in the IDE forever and just code up applications that only ever run in IntelliJ or Eclipse, because applications can't always live there. They have to be deployed to a server, for example, running the cloud, on cloud infrastructure such as AWS or Microsoft Azure. Or maybe you turn towards mobile development and then you're in an Android environment and the code then has to be deployed and run on the Android device itself. There are different deployment targets for Java applications to run in, depending upon what you're actually coding and what your project's about. So really this next level is about getting you outside of the IDE and getting you to write code that runs outside of the IDE that can be deployable in whatever environment it needs to be deployed into, and then getting that code to interact with whatever it needs to interact with. Now at this point, when you're on level 2, you probably started as a junior developer, you're actually working at a company, or possibly as well if you're trying to get a head start, you're aspiring to work in a company. So now this level is all about getting you to be able to write software components, Java applications which interact with other bits and pieces that corporates have. And those other bits and pieces are going to be things like databases, for example, where the data for an application is stored. They're going to be messaging systems, which perhaps allow triggering of certain events in the system, possibly having to work with certain components of certain cloud frameworks, like in AWS, for example, interacting with Cognito to be able to authenticate and authorize users, and those kinds of things. And so in order to work with these different components of an enterprise architecture, databases, messaging systems, whatever it might be, you're not really going to want to code that up by hand from scratch in just core Java. No, instead, you're going to turn to already tried and true battle-tested enterprise development frameworks, such as Spring, or better still, Spring Boot, which give you out-of-the-box components and APIs to be able to interact with all those different systems. At this point, you're going to be exposed to much more than just the Java programming language now. You're going to be exposed to configuration, you're going to be exposed to understanding how you interact with different systems, how things like transactions work, for example, possibly more complex concepts such as multi-threading and concurrency. And moreover, underpinning all of this, you're going to be moving into that area where you start coding within the constraints of a system architecture. So where you have to use this particular database, for example, you have to use this particular email server or whatever it might be. And with that, you're going to be developing your software using frameworks like Spring or Spring Boot and coding along their particular paradigms for how you interact with those systems. So level 1, we were just there with core Java, writing apps which ran in an IDE. And now level 2, when we're moving into enterprise Java, we've now moved away from that kind of insular existence, if you like, of just you and core Java code in the IDE. And we're now learning these more advanced skills to be able to get our projects out of the IDE and have them become proper enterprise projects, which are then useful to an actual organization, the company that you work for, because they can then interact within the technical landscape of whatever the system architecture happens to be in your company. And that in itself, moving from level 1 to level 2, that requires quite a mind shift, and it can be a bit scary as well when you first make that leap outside the IDE, outside core Java, and you have to get to grips with all these new concepts, things like dependency injection, auto wiring, annotations, proxies, that kind of thing. And that of course is just on the Java coding level, but you also have to as well, in addition to that, develop and broaden your understanding of technology in general by getting to know other system architecture components like databases, for example, as we just spoke about. And that could be being able to log into the database, query for data using SQL, possibly even altering the structure of the database, so adding some new tables or whatever with DDL, understanding how relationships work between tables, concepts like normalization and that kind of thing, and oftentimes even accessing a database through a kind of bridging technology such as ORM, so object relational management, using something like Hibernate either directly or possibly indirectly using Spring Data and JPA, the Java Persistence API. Now, if you're not at that level yet, don't worry, because you'll get there, but all we're doing now is just summarizing how we move through the different levels as a Java developer to get to the end goal of where we really want to be, which is where we have mastery of the craft, we know exactly what we're doing, and we feel kind of autonomous in what we're doing as well. Now, of course, once you're actually working in a company and you're getting used to this enterprise development, you also have to kind of ascend to another level as well, and that's where you can work as what I would call like a team developer. And this is where you know how to use the tools and what processes are involved working as a Java developer inside a software development team. So for example, this might be in your company, you've got 3 or 4 other developers that you work with, and these other developers are also contributing to the same project, to the same code base, and you're all working together collaboratively to evolve this system, to add new features, new functionality. So at this point, we're learning how we can build the software, how we can push changes into version control using a system like into version control using a version control system such as Git, how we can interpret build pipelines that get triggered whenever we commit new code, how we can submit pull requests. These are changes we want to make to the code base, how to get those in, that is approved by our peer software developers, or maybe perhaps by a tech lead, and ultimately even how you then merge those changes in, because it may well be that by the time you've actually submitted the PR, that pull request, the code base has further moved on in the meantime, and then it's not quite the same as it was before you actually did the change, before you actually added those code changes. And so at this point, you'll need expertise of merging and rebasing to be able to get those changes in. In addition, you'll have the meetings that you attend, so stand-ups, retrospectives, sprint demos, planning sessions, all that kind of stuff. And at that point then, you've kind of managed to spread your wings with Enterprise Java and frameworks. You've become a team developer. You can work within a team, and you're now a professional software engineer who's coding away as a Java developer in your day job. So even in this second level, which is almost split between the move from understanding core Java in an IDE to understanding enterprise Java development within a system architecture using frameworks like Spring, and having this other level within it, which is knowing and learning about how to use all of the tools that support the development process and the processes that are involved in being a developer on a team, you can see that even in those first two levels, level 1, core Java, level 2, enterprise developer in a company, there's a lot of stuff there. So if you're at that stage, if you're at level 2, pat yourself on the back, because that is a real achievement. If you actually take stock, we never really tend to take a moment and just look at how far we've come with something. We never really do that. We always take it for granted about how much stuff we know, right? But if you actually take stock and think about all of the different technologies that you've learnt about by now as a level 2 developer, all the different things you can do, all the processes you're aware of and all that kind of thing, yeah, just take a moment to be, I guess, kind of like self-impressed. Just take a moment to be really impressed by that, because you've done a really, really good job just to be able to get there. And if you're not there yet, if you're not on level 2, don't be phased about it, because you will get there. It's just experience that you need. And you either get experience through cumulative time on the job, exposures to different technologies and different techniques, or through training and taking courses and that kind of thing. But don't worry, you will get there. But this is just to show you what it looks like when you're actually there. Okay, so level 1 we've seen, these humble beginnings with core Java in an IDE. We've then seen level 2, which is where you spread your wings with enterprise Java and get to know frameworks and become a team developer and become a developer in an actual team. And now once you've gone through these two levels, an interesting thing starts to happen. Once you have all these things in place, your behavior and your mentality and mindset, I guess, tends to change a little bit. You start taking more initiative once you get to that level of competence. You start taking on more things, you get a deeper understanding of the whole craft of software engineering as a whole. You can kind of see how things work from a big picture perspective, which is very handy, in addition to being able to drill down and see exactly what happens under the covers at a very low level perspective as well. And with this, it means that systems you're working on then become easy, because you become more and more intimately familiar with how that system works. And when I say system now, I mean the actual projects you've been developing or you've been working on. Maybe you've been working on the same system for 18 months or so. At this point, you've really got a good handle on how everything hangs together. And now at this point, you're very valuable, right? So if you are at this level now and you've been working on the same system for like 18 months, it's become easy for you to add features, to fix defects. You can turn things around very, very quickly. You've become kind of the go-to person in the team for issues and advice on how to work with a particular part of the application, or maybe the whole application, if you're doing a really, really stellar job and really, really getting into it. At this point, you're very valuable. So it's good if you can make it known to your boss and possibly even ask for a pay rise, because it's very difficult for an organization to replace that knowledge. Not necessarily that knowledge, but that conscious competence and quick and efficient ability to work with that system, which is what, their products that they've been developing. At this point in the team, you're a massive value add. So if you can make a list of points to your boss as to how valuable you are, or even if you can ideally make them see it so they don't have to be told, you can just make them see it, then naturally you're going to get a pay rise anyway. Now, pay rises can be tricky. We'll cover that in a different episode about how you actually get what you're worth. But maybe for now, just know how valuable you are, okay? Now, money aside, from a more philosophical point of view, what the really cool thing is at this level, this level 3 kind of level, is where you start to see the things you couldn't see before as a junior developer. It's almost like seeing the invisible. And this is where what wasn't even visible to you before as a beginner suddenly becomes crystal clear and very apparent to you as a seasoned Java developer. And at this point, your job becomes very easy. You can almost do it blindfold, as the expression goes, and you've got a real feeling of empowerment and autonomy. So this level 3, I'd almost call it kind of starting to see the invisible, which leads to empowerment and autonomy. Now at this point, when this happens, so you've gone through level 1, core Java, level 2, enterprise Java, level 3, you're sailing away, everything's easy, you can even do things blindfold. The best part of this happens. You get excitement about doing your own thing. You literally feel that you can create anything completely from scratch and not be fazed by it. And with this, of course, you also have a lot of opportunity. So you could decide, for example, do you know what? I want to make my own startup. I want to make my own software as a service company based on a product I'm going to design and code, and you go that way. Or you could be like, do you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to work for a startup, get shares, get equity, go in that direction. Or you might be, no, I'm going to go for a top investment bank, work my way up, become CTO. Or maybe you've got the idea of, you know what, no, Silicon Valley is for me. It's either going to be Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, whoever it might be. I'm going to go work for one of these colossal big tech giants. At that point, you've got all this opportunity and you've kind of got to the stage where you can pretty much almost write your own ticket. And that's a great place to be and a great feeling to have. But it takes time, devotion to the craft, and persistence. It's not easy, but well worth the effort. And of course, you can do it. It might seem like it's such a mountain to climb, you're never going to be there if you're just getting started with Java, or you're just facing those compilation errors, or you're not quite getting the hang of something at work, or you're just not getting to grips with a framework or with the technology or whatever. But, you know, the entire point of software engineering, from my experience, is that you're always running through brick walls. So frequently, you'll get to a problem and you don't know how to solve the problem, but it's through persistence and applied effort to resolve that issue that allows you to sort of punch through the wall and to keep going, to keep making progress. But if you take a step back and if you imagine that you spend 10, 15, 20, 25 years or whatever constantly going through those brick walls, mastering the habit of determination to be able to go through those walls, then when you get to level 3, really, from a technology point of view, there's literally nothing you can't do. As long as you work hard, you have self-belief, and you put your mind completely to it. But as I say, it takes time, devotion to the craft, and above all, persistence. Now, of course, you can shortcut your success and get there quicker by taking courses and getting help where you need it, which is what Java Easily is all about, and it's what we're here for you for. So you can check out our courses if you like on courses.javaeasily.com if you want to get there a bit quicker. So that's about it for today. All that remains to say is have a great day, have a think about just how far you've come, or from the flip side, just how far you want to go, and have a great week ahead. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.